Elsie Jensen here. Today we're going to make steak bites with mac and cheese and some homemade sourdough discard donut holes. So I've got a pot of water boiling over here just to save us some time, and you can see it's got a nice rapid boil, all the steam's coming out. I'm going to throw in some of my corkscrew noodles. I like corkscrews over regular macaroni noodles because I just think they look more bougie. I'm going to pour in some of those. And we're gonna have those boil and cook while we prep and make the rest of our food. So I'm just gonna give them a good stir so they don't stick at the bottom. And now I'm going to prep my steak for my steak bites. I've got 3 New York strips in here that I'm going to just cut the fat strip off and then chop up and then season. So one thing that's nice about the New York strips is you have this nice fatty piece right here that will be easy to chop off since we're not grilling. Sometimes I grill my meat and then I'll slice it up and have it on the air. But it's really, really cold here right now. I think it's 17 degrees, so I don't want to go outside and grill. So I'm just going to chop up my New York strips into bite-sized pieces that I'm going to saute on high heat to really cook the outsides up but have a nice tender middle. I'm gonna put them, I'm making them about a little square like that, so a perfect bite-sized piece to go on top of our yummy mac and cheese. I was cleaning out my fridge today and I found a lot of like little bits of cheeses that I needed to use, so we're gonna be using those. I have some Parmesan, some pizza cheese, some Toma, some white cheddar, and some Gouda that we will, some of it will grate up, but that we'll throw in our mac and cheese. But I'm just gonna cut them up into little bite-sized little nuggets like that. And then I'm going to season them with Worcestershire sauce and garlic salt before sauteing them up. That will add, Worcestershire will help with the acidity, will help break down the fat and have a nice tender, juicy piece of meat. And of course, garlic salt. It's my favorite seasoning. It works with everything. And then of course, I'm going to discard I have some sourdough discard that I need to feed so I can make a fresh loaf of bread later today. So I'm gonna take out some of that and use that to make our donuts, air fried, or that I'll fry in the oven real quick. But they're really, they're gonna be cinnamon sugar and delicious, but it's a great way you can use some of that sourdough discard with an easy, simple recipe. Okay, almost done slicing these guys up. Just one more, and you see I'm just trimming off that big fatty piece. For grilling, that fatty piece is great because it will reduce down in the high heat outside, but if you try to fry that up on your pan, it's just gonna be a chewy mess. So I'm just gonna take that piece off and then make some nice slices into some, I would say they're probably like almost a 1x1, maybe a little bit smaller than a 1x1, like inch chunk. And you know, when you cook up meat, they always shrink a little bit because of the water inside the meat kind of evaporates. So get this, perfect. But this is just an easy, quick meal that I'm gonna throw together for my kids. I've been out of town for the last 2 days and they think they're all done with Papa's cooking and they're ready for some delicious food because Papa can't cook. And done. So I've got my meat all cut up in there like that. And now I'm just gonna give my hands a quick little rinse because I've got some raw meat on it. And if all piece fall off, let's see if I can get it before the dogs grab it. Snooze you lose, Bruni. Okay, so in here I've got my meat chunks and I'm going to give it a good covering of Worcestershire sauce or Worcestershire. And this is, it has a nice like kind of a vinegar base acidity to it, which will really cut up the fat in the meat to make it really tender and juicy. I probably put about 1 tablespoon to 2 tablespoons in there. And then I'm gonna give a nice sprinkling of garlic salt. This is where most of my seasoning is gonna come from. And You could also add, if you wanted a little bit of heat, you could add some like Cajun seasoning in it, but my family, they're kind of wussies when it comes to heat. And I'm gonna grab some tongs, and I'm just gonna mix up my meat and make sure it's thoroughly seasoned. And you could do this with your hands or a spoon if you wanted to, but I'm gonna be using the tongs when I cook with, so that way I don't make as many dishes. Okay, perfect. Now that these are all mixed up, I'm gonna just set it to the side so it can marinate for a few seconds, and I'm gonna work on getting my cheeses, the rest of my cheeses prepped. So this is a Toma, which is like an Italian cheese. And then I have a little bit of pizza blend left, a little bit of Parmesan, and then I have 2 small little bricks of white cheddar and some Gouda. These are all just kind of leftover cheeses in my refrigerator that I'm just like, I need to use up so I can just get some new ones and go from there. So I'm just gonna use my grater and just grate these into just a real simple, you can see as they come down, a grate. You could, if you wanted to, you could throw them in a food processor and mince it up real quick, but I find that this works well. You could also just, if you have a bunch of random shredded cheeses, throw those together. All of these cheeses have a fairly good melting point, which makes them good for mac and cheese. And this is gonna be a simple mac and cheese. I'm not going to bake it, so I do sometimes make mac and cheeses where I'll mix it together and then bake it in the oven with a cheese crust on it. This one's just gonna be a quick and fresh mac and cheese. So right now I'm shredding up my white cheddar. Perfect. And you can see it goes for things, cheddar is a harder cheese to sometimes when it's an age because it crumbles. But that is a-okay. And then I'm gonna use some Toma, which is just a fresh Italian cheese. I'm gonna get a knife because look, I don't wanna grate any of the wax part on the outside or the hard shell, so I'm just gonna get a knife and cut that off because that won't taste good. But these were left over. We made a bunch of different specialty pizzas over the holidays, and this is just some leftover cheese from them. And then I had some leftover from our Swedish smorgasbord, which is a Christmas feast where you have a bunch of, it's like a 5-course meal that you have a bunch of different courses in it. And one of the courses is like cold meats and cheeses. And I always buy big chunks of cheese, but we rarely eat it all. And so it's great for like cooking and using in recipes later. I'm really big on trying to use up what I have in my house instead of going out and buying special ingredients for each meal that I make. That way I'm not wasting food. And when you're feeding a small army like I am, I've got 5 kids and then I also feed my parents. So we have got 9 mouths to feed every day. You want to try to be as conscious with what you're using and making as possible, but I still like to make sure we have really good, healthy, yummy, delicious food. So I've got some of my Toma. I'm probably gonna save this because this is a good amount of Toma to use for another recipe. And then I'm gonna cut off a good chunk of my Gouda right here. And we're gonna grate some of my Gouda up. So I'll probably leave this triangle, which is still good for like slicing for sandwiches. And I'm gonna make sure I peel off this wax right here because this won't be good. And when I grate it, once I start getting the harder part, I'll probably toss it because it doesn't taste as good. It doesn't melt as nice. There. But using freshly grated cheese is works a lot better than if you are going to use pre-shredded cheeses, because most pre-shredded cheeses have a anti-caking agent in it, which just means it won't melt quite as nicely because it's designed to prevent it from melting. So a lot of times you can just gently rinse your cheeses. If you notice they have like a white powdery or cakey substance on them, if you give them a quick rinse before you use them in a recipe that you want the cheese to be really well melted, it will help it melt nicer and blend better together. So I'm gonna just grate the rest of this. And oh, my butter over here with my pasta is boiling really nicely. I'm gonna give it a good stir because I don't want any of my noodles to stick to the bottom of my pot. That just makes it harder to clean later. And I guess this might be controversial with some, I don't salt my pasta water. I know a lot of people do things. I feel like you're just adding in extra sodium that makes no difference in the flavor, because most of the time we aren't just eating our noodles raw or like without any seasoning on it, and then I make sure my sauce is well seasoned instead of wasting it on the noodles. Look at this mountain of cheese over here. In case you're joining us, we have white cheddar. We have Toma, which is an Italian cheese, similar to, I guess, an Asiago Parmesan, and then some Gouda right here. So I'm gonna grate that up. I think we have a good amount right there. And then I'm going to add in some Parmesan, because I just have a little bit of that left over in my mix right here. Just wanting to get through, and I have a little bit of pizza cheese, which this has mozzarella, provolone, and Asiago. So it will be more of like an Italian. We do have some white cheddar in there. But this is my little cheese pile that I'm gonna use for my mac and cheese. Okay, while this is sitting to the side, we're gonna work on our air fryer donuts that will pop in my oven. Now my oven has an air fryer setting, but you could also use an air fryer that you have an appliance, as works as well. So let me get my bowl out. And we're gonna start with our sourdough discard. So I'm gonna take it off, and you can see mine has got a nice juicy bubbling on top. So before I use my discard, I wanna make sure I stir it up. Those are just enzymes from the discard. Just kind of like how yogurt has, like if you leave yogurt, it has a juicy like liquids on the top, or sour cream. Those are just the enzymes, the lactose bacteria, but that's what that's from. It's good, healthy gut bacteria that you'll want. So I'm gonna just stir it up because that's what helped ferment my sourdough. Mix it back in there. Good, and now I'm gonna use a half a cup of starter, of discard. I'm gonna feed this in a little bit, and then you'll be able to use it, because when you wanna use sourdough starter for bread, it needs to be fed a couple hours beforehand so that it is nice and fermented. So I'm gonna put a half a cup of my discard in here. And I will set this aside for later. And here's my little cheesecloth. And now I'm going to add in 3/4 cups of sour cream. So you see how our starter had that little liquid on it? See how our sour cream has it? Those are just the live bacteria that in the sour cream and in the thing that it's their, I guess, their waste what they do, but it's completely harmless, and it just shows that you have a nice active culture in it. So don't be scared of that liquid if you've ever wondered what it is. It's perfectly healthy. It's really gut healthy. So I'm going to put in 3/4 cups. So I'll start off with a half a cup because my measurer is already here. Tamp it down, make sure I fill up out any of those things. And now I just need about 1/4 of a cup more. And I'll put it in there. One thing I love about these measuring cups is they have, you can't see it now that's covered in sour cream, but they have like a line in there that says a 1/4 of a cup. So it helps you if you don't want to get a lot of stuff messy. So I'm done with that. And now I'm gonna give this a nice little stir to mix my sour cream and my sourdough discard. I'm gonna mix that together until I've got it all completely blended. That way it'll just be easier when I'm mixing in my dry ingredients. And now I'm going to add a teaspoon of baking soda. This will be my rising agent, which will help puff it up. So I'm gonna add a teaspoon of baking soda in here. And then I'm gonna add just a little bit of salt. So about a half a teaspoon, not much, just a little bit to cut in there. and a little bit of sugar to add some sweetness. Most of the sweetness to this donut is gonna come in the cinnamon sugar that we roll it in, but we wanna have a little bit of sweetness to our dough. So I'm gonna add about 1/4 cup of sugar. So I'm gonna add just a 1/4 cup of sugar. You don't need a lot because most of the sweetness is gonna come later. And I'm gonna give this a good mix before I add my flour in so that all of my baking soda can be mixed in with my wet ingredient. And make sure it's thoroughly mixed. That way I don't have to go through the pain of sifting my baking soda and my flour together. And while I'm mixing this, I'm just gonna put a little bit of butter in my little saucepan over here to melt. This is gonna be, I'm gonna brush my dough on top with a little bit of butter, and then also, once I pop them out of the oven, I'm going to brush them with a little bit of butter and roll them in a cinnamon sugar. So I'm gonna just turn that on high to melt it. You could also melt it in the microwave if you wanted to. I'm gonna give my noodles a nice stir. Look at them. They probably have about 2 to 3 more minutes left in cooking. And give this a good stir. And now I'm going to add in 1 cup of flour. So. Just make sure there's no pockets. And I'm gonna start mixing this up. And I might need to add in a little bit more just depending on how sticky the dough is. So I'm gonna give it a nice stir. It's gonna be a little bit of a sticky dough, but it should still be manageable with your hands. Okay, I can see it's still a little bit wet, so I'm gonna add in a little bit more. It just depends on how liquidy your sourdough starter is. You can have various things that can be more thick. Sometimes your sourdough starter is a little bit thinner, and so your flour kind of just goes in there until you have a dough that's workable. Okay, this seems like it's gonna be a good workable dough. Okay, I'm gonna give my butter a little stir here because I don't want it to burn. I'm gonna turn it down a little bit and just let this last part melt. Oh. My watch is talking to me. Oh, look over here now. You can see the starch from the noodles are starting to boil over. So I'm gonna pull out one, blow on it, and I'm gonna give it a test, make sure it's soft enough. My trick to knowing it, not just through biting it and tasting it, so if you don't wanna bite it, you can cut it off. And if you see no white on the inside of your noodle at all, that means they're ready. So these are perfect. If they have a little bit of white, that means the dough or the noodle hasn't been completely soaked in enough water to make it ready. So I'm gonna just take this with my strainer and dump out my noodle. And I'm gonna give it a good shake because I don't want too much residual water in there because we'll be adding some cream and butter and stuff to it. And I find that macaroni noodles or corkscrew noodles, they tend to hold a little bit more water in them than some of the flatter noodles. So while that is hot and ready, I'm going to add in some butter. And I haven't turned my heat back on yet because I'm gonna wait to do that. I'm gonna add about 3/4 of a stick of butter. And I'm just gonna stir it up and make sure I push my butter down to the bottom of it so that it will melt in there gradually. My butter over here is completely melted. We've got a nice caramel color on it, which is perfect. We wanted a nice little brown butter, but we don't want it to be burned. So I'm gonna give it, and I'm gonna remove it off the heat. And now, I'm gonna get out a pan, and we'll start with our making our little donut holes. I like to lay my baking sheet a little bit of parchment paper instead of greasing it because I think that it makes cleanup much easier. Okay, so I've got a little bit of a sticky dough here. So I'm gonna add a little bit more flour just on the top to make rolling a little bit easier. And I'm just gonna grab the thing out like that and just make a little donut hole ball. And I'm just putting a little bit of flour on top simply for the ease of rolling. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna pop these in the air fryer. I have my air fryer preheating at 425, and we're gonna just pop them in and bake them about 4 minutes on each side. But before we bake them, we're gonna just do a quick little brush over with some brown butter. Oh, looks like I have a little kiddo who's turning during their nap time right now. I think I put my youngest one down for nap, and I'm making lunch for my older ones. And I'm gonna give this a little stir so that the noodles don't stick on the bottom at all. Right there, perfect. And I want that butter, I'm having that butter slowly melt in there. I don't have the heat on it because it is nice and hot from the noodles, but when I add my cream and my cheeses on, I will put a low heat on. My hand's a little sticky, so I'm just gonna grab just a pinch more of flour just to make this a little bit easier to roll. And perfect. You can make these bigger or smaller. I'm just doing nice big ones because the kids will probably eat 2 or 3 at a time. And if I make them much smaller, that's just more work for me. Okay, let's see. Get a good strong right here. And let me do about one. I got a little bit more dough left in here. So this is gonna make about 12, maybe 15. Look at it. If I don't have the flour on there, see how it sticks to my hand? Just a little bit of flour makes the dough so much easier to roll into the ball. Just like this. And in just a second, you guys can join me as I walk over. And I've got the rest of my dough out, and we're gonna do, it looks like I've got a sad guy. He's going down. I just put him down for a nap, so I think he must have just startled when the garbage truck went by. Let's see. I'm gonna do a nice right there, and this last one got really sticky, as you can see. So I'm gonna wash my hands up real quick, and then I'm gonna brush them with some butter, and then we'll work on our steak bites and our mac and cheese. So I'm gonna just get a little pastry brush out of here and take some of my brown butter, and I'm just gonna do a quick little brush over them with the brown butter. And that's like this. And then I'm gonna save that brown butter for when I take them out of the oven, because I'm just gonna brush it again, and then we'll roll them in some cinnamon sugar. So we've got this like perfect. And you can see my last 2 ones were a little bit sticky, so they didn't come out quite as nice, but it won't affect the taste. And then I'm gonna go and put these in my oven over here on my air fryer setting at 425. And the air fryer is gonna work kind of like a convection oven, and it's just gonna blow the air around and cook it at a high heat. I'm gonna set my timer for 4 minutes, and then we'll come over here and we'll flip the donuts over to the other side. While we are, I'm gonna give this a stir, and then I'm going to turn on my burner over here for our steak bites. And a lot of times I'll cook them with oil, but I'm going to cook them with butter because I really want the flavor of the butter on my steak bites. So most things I cook with oil, but these steak bites I want to cook with some butter. So I'm gonna put in about the 1/4 stick of butter there, and then a little bit of not fresh garlic, but minced garlic. So it's a little bit different than fresh garlic. I'm gonna put that in my butter to saute up. And now I'm gonna work on my my cheesy mac and noodles. There we go. So I'm gonna turn my heat on to about a medium high, and I'm gonna add in a little bit of heavy cream, just like this. And I'm going to start adding in my cheeses, just like this. And I'm gonna add it in, but I'm not gonna add it all in, just like this. And I'm gonna stir it and right this. Nice big stir. I can hear he's starting to fall back asleep now. Little guy, he just went down for a nap about 25 minutes ago. So I think he just woke up and is there, but He's a tired guy, so I'm gonna try to see if he'll fall back asleep. Because typically he'll sleep for another 2 hours after this, but occasionally wakes up. You see my cheese is starting to melt in nicely, just like this. Perfect. I'm gonna add in just a little bit more cream. Perfect. And my key ingredient over here, I'm gonna add in some garlic salt to season it some, and then I'll add in the rest of my cheese. But this is gonna be a really delicious, cheesy macaroni and cheese. So I've got my butter over here working. I'm gonna give this a good stir, and then we're gonna add in our last bit of cheese, and then I'll turn the heat off and just let the residual heat cook it. So I'm gonna add in the last of it. If you're joining us, this is Gouda, white cheddar, Toma, some pizza cheese, and some Parmesan. So it's a good blend of cheeses that I had left over in my fridge from the holidays, and I just want to use them up. But you can see, look how cheesy this is getting. It's perfect. Just do a little bit more. And sometimes if you see that it's a little bit dry, you just add a little bit more cream in there, and that will help them blend together. And now that my skillet is getting pretty hot over here, which is what I want, I'll saute them up nicely. There we go. Perfect. Now that my mac and cheese over here is ready, I'm just gonna turn it on low to keep that residual heat on it, and it nice and creamy and melted. And we're gonna work on our steak bites. And little Jackie has fallen back asleep, which is perfect. Otherwise, he would be a grumpy boy if he came out. I fed him earlier. He had some avocado toast for lunch and some blueberries and some cheese and watermelon and yogurt. So he'll enjoy some of this as an afternoon snack. So I've got my butter browning and my garlic in there. Give it a little sizzle around. And my pan is nice and hot, which is what I want for these steak bites, because I want to sear them quickly and then, but not overcook them. So I'm just going to try to sprinkle them around evenly on the pan so that they're getting browned all the way around. And then I hear my timer for my oven beeping, so we'll go check our donuts in just a second. Perfect. Smells good. You can smell the cooking up. And these won't take very long to cook because I've made them into nice bite-sized pieces. But the trick is you want them in a hot skillet to sear it off. If you cook them on too low of heat, their juices will come out and they won't sear up nicely. Probably could have used an even bigger skillet because I had a good amount over here. Just a few more pieces left. Make sure it's nice and high. And now we need to go flip our donuts over here that we have in the air fryer. So let me get a pair of tongs. And since I'm going to reach it into a hot oven, I'm going to use an oven mitt too. You can see how they've puffed up nicely. So I'm going to just pull it out, and I'm just going to shut my oven door real quick, keep the heat in there. And I'm going to flip each one over. They're still a little doughy on the inside, but that's why we're flipping them over, so we get a nice cooked all the way through. Perfect. Just like this. That's important. I use tongs on this because it will be hot. This is cooking at 425. And you see how easily it comes off the parchment paper? I'm going to pop this in, and it's going to cook for another 4 minutes on the other side. So I'll set my timer for 4 minutes. And now we can come over here and look at our steak bites. Perfect. Do you see how they're starting to brown over there and show through? So what I'm going to do is these ones that I see that have brown, I'm just going to flip them over, and do you see how they have a lovely sear on them? It's exactly what I wanted. Because I don't want them to get overcooked. I want them to have a nice sear on them, but still be pink in the inside. So they actually cook quite fast. Perfect. And the trick is making sure your skillet is heated up enough to do this, and that your bites are in a small enough size. Because otherwise they'll just sweat all their liquids out, and you'll have more of a soggy meat than a nice crisp coloring on them like this. That's perfect. These are just about done. And then give them a good stir. I'm going to start plating. You can look in here, our mac and cheese looks like beautiful. You can see the cheeses have all melted together wonderfully. Perfect. Look at that nice gooey-ness. So I'm going to turn that off. And I'm going to start getting ready to plate our mac and cheese with our steak bites. Give these a quick little turn. Perfect. And I'm going to place them in a pasta bowl. So I'm going to start out, I'll move it right here. I'm going to give myself a nice heaping, look at this, ooey, gooey, perfect. You can't say there isn't enough cheese in this mac and cheese. So I've got a nice sop of mac and cheese with some steak bites. You can see they're searing off. I'm going to turn it off because I don't want them to cook anymore. And I like to put the steak bites just right over my mac and cheese like that. Look at this nice golden crust on them. Perfect. So, simple, easy meal. I will, of course, taste it. And then we can get our cinnamon donuts out in just a second. So I'm going to... Perfect. And I'm going to cut open one of my pieces of meat to show you how I like it on the inside. So I'm going to just cut up. Do you see how you still got some pink on the inside? That's what I want. I don't want it to be all brown. I want it to be nice and pink on the inside so that it's like a medium to a medium rare. My bigger ones will be more like a medium rare. So I'm going to take this off the heat completely so that when I serve up my kiddos in a few minutes, they'll have it. But this was delicious. And now let's check on our sourdough donuts, our discard sourdough donut bites. And look at them. They've got a little bit of time left in here. But sometimes their dough looks like they're perfect. They've got a nice golden brown to them, which is exactly what I wanted. So I'm pulling them out. Perfect. And then the last part that we do, this is the easiest part. I'm going to get a bowl to mix together my cinnamon and my sugar. So that after I cover them with some of the brown butter, I just have to put them in there and flip them with a fork. So I'm going to get a nice scoop of sugar in here. Just because having a little bit more makes it easier than having less. And then I'm putting about a tablespoon of cinnamon in there. Let me get a fork real quick. And give it a nice stir with a fork. You could use a spoon, but the fork just works so much easier. And now I have my nice cinnamon sugar mixture. And I'm going to take my brown butter that I have right here. I'm going to just give a nice coating on each side. And this is what's going to help the cinnamon sugar stick to it. So if you were frying donuts, you wouldn't need to do this part. But since I did them in the air fryer, you're going to want them to have a little bit of butter. And I'll flip them over real quick so I can get both sides covered. Look at that nice golden brown color on it. Again, they might not be the most beautiful thing, and I could have worked and taken time to make them even nicer. But for my family, it's about how fast you can get food out. So I'm always trying to make my lunches and dinners in 30 minutes to an hour. But home-cooked, delicious food. And now I'm just going to take one at a time, and you just kind of turn them in the cinnamon sugar like this. And they're perfect. I'll even give you a taste bite. Look at that. Perfect, moist, delicious. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed cooking with us today. I do lots of live shows and I do lots of different recipes. Feel free to comment if you like to see something cooked, but don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for joining us.